Buddy, this is the CT Sports Talent Show. My name is Christopher Saunders, and I'm pleased to have on the founder of NFP, and he's got his hat in a million other things as well. James Thomson, who's with me. James, I appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You got it, Chris. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to be here.
First and foremost, because I'm sure Coach Mazzone, who coaches the Stafford Co-op, will probably be watching this. And I know he gave me your name and said, hey, you got to have James on because of the All-Star game, which will be the inaugural one between Connecticut and New York for, I think, the seniors. And we'll get into that kind of later on in our discussion. But you and I were just talking about, I think it's great what you do because obviously as the media, no matter where you are, the goal is, and I've always believed this, even broadcasting games, we are not the story, the kids are. And as a great older broadcaster, Rob Adams, who does the games in the FCAC, he always says, we're just the soundtrack, broadcasters. We're just the soundtrack. The kids make the plays and do the work. We have the easy job. And I think that is awesome. And that's probably very eloquently said by a veteran. And for what you do, James, as far as covering so many sports, doing the awards and all of that, and the foundations and all that, it is just awesome. And I think it's really cool.
I appreciate that, and that was well said. You know that the players, the coaches, their communities, to me, they are the story, and more importantly, they're the focus. It's real to us. My team and I. It's always been very natural for us to do what we do because, we love the people that we get to work with, and we find everything they do interesting. So it's real easy to get up in the morning and go to work when that's how you feel about the people you're going to work with.
Talk to me a little bit about just, how did you get into what you're doing now? Like kind of what sparked that? What made you like what was the angel in your ear saying, "Hey, you've got to do this because this is going to be freaking awesome."
Yeah, well, that's a big question. You mean overall or a specific project?
Overall, I mean, the projects come as you roll. I mean, like, again, this podcast started because of COVID. And then
Yeah.
from this podcast has turned into relationships, and I would say friends with like Coach Mazzone, some other great coaches in Connecticut. And I really do think it's opened up doors for myself, but I'm not by any means. It's all about the coaches and the players. So for you, what opened, this opportunity? How did this start?
Yeah, I have to really go back because how I got here is kind of crazy. I went to Sacred Heart University, and there's no bones about it. I went to Sacred Heart to play football. They had the major that I wanted, but the only reason I went to Sacred Heart was because they recruited me. And I have to just make note that my college coach, Gary Rio, just passed away, and I just went to his services yesterday and we paid our respects, and I saw my teammates from Sacred Heart. But they did a great job recruiting me out of Long Island. At the time, I had to choose between Stony Brook. Ithaca was on the list as well, but it was really between Stony Brook and Sacred Heart. And thank God I went to Sacred Heart because that's where I met my wife. And coming out of college, I had three options. I had my letters of recommendation for law school. Sacred Heart wanted me to do a graduate assistant position and get my MBA and coach. But I wanted to open a health club. And so, of course, much to my parents' dismay, and at the time my girlfriend, now wife's dismay, I chose the health club. Why wouldn't I? So I really thought I wanted to train athletes. And I thought, well, if I have a health club and I serve the general population, I could build up the membership base enough to, on the side, train athletes because I knew I wanted to be involved in sports. After about a year of running a health club, I realized it's not what I wanted to do. And my girlfriend was doing her master's work in physical therapy. And she just said to me, "You're miserable. You have to figure it out. I'm going to graduate with my master's and start my career. And you could have gotten your MBA and gone into coaching. You could have went to law school, and you decided to do this. So either continue with the gym business or get the hell out of it." And so I said, fine. So we went on to Hot Jobs, which is a thing back then. It doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think. Now it's like Indeed or some of the others. And I put in sales and sports, and this company Varsity Gold came up. So that's how I got involved in the fundraising. Is they were a national fundraising company. So I started with them doing fundraising. Why that was important to me was the school that I went to, that I graduated from in high school was Amityville. And we never had and still do not have a lot of resources. It is a very economically depressed school district. And I just remember the uniforms that we had were always old and tattered. And we would be made fun of by opposing teams. And I know what that felt like. And I know our weight equipment was dated. And so I felt like if I had the opportunity to help teams raise money, that I could solve a problem at its core. And so I would say about 6 years into that journey, and I had a lot of success doing it. I climbed the ranks with the company. I became a manager, overseeing half the Northeast. But very quickly, I started to want more. And while I was at Sacred Heart, my sports law professor, Bernie Pellegrino, was very high up in the Walter Camp Football Foundation. And when he became president, he said to me, "You want to be involved in the game of football. I'd like you to join the foundation, and I'd like you to be involved." And so I quickly became a member of the Walter Camp Football Foundation and started on, with the high school committee. And then about a year to a year and a half later, my counterpart, Kevin Digby, who I was part of hiring for Varsity Gold, joined me. And then that's kind of how that was the dream team, so to speak. When the two of us connected, Kevin was a longtime youth football coach, and our passion for the game and for kids, it just meshed. And so when we got a hold of that high school committee for the Walter Camp Football Foundation, the outreach began, and it just manifested from there. And I'll say the same way that, the fundraising spoke to me, everything that we've done up until this point has been because somebody has asked for our help. And I can't take credit for a lot of the ideas, because what I hear are people's problems. They'll say, it would be really nice if we could do this for the kids, but we don't have the money, or no one will cover this, or no one will do this. And then I find myself scratching my chin and saying, well, how could we figure this out? And that's led us down, all sorts of crazy paths. And it led us to launching great programs and events like the Breakfast of Champions through Walter Camp, and now some of the other initiatives that we've been part of. So that's kind of been the journey for me and how we fell into it. So I always say that the fundraising is our ground game. I always tell my coaches, I have to do that because that's what generates the revenue for all of this to happen. And then when we have excess time or funds, we put it back into the client base and the things that are important to the coaches and the kids. And we try to live that as our truth every day. And the coaches that know us and have known us over the years know that to be true.
I think that's, first and foremost, and you and I were talking before we started this recording, as far as some issues that are happening as far as I know there was an article written in CT Insider about the inequities in certain towns, like prime example, one town that may have a higher income compared to another town, which may not have the amount of income high enough to be able to help the high schools, the kids, and so on, with camps and so on and so forth. And I think for you, when you said, okay, well, let's try to figure this out. What's a solution? How can we get things done? I think that is something where I think in today's age, it's all right, let's complain, let's do this, then, do that and whatever. But we never really have solutions. We just kind of complain about it. And I feel like we need to have more people like you where it's okay. How do we figure this out? How do we make things better? Okay, there may be a couple bumps in the road. I know you were telling me some stories of how things started, but then obviously you don't learn like playing, right? Nobody's going to play perfect, but
Right.
the more that you practice, the more that you work out, the more you train, the more you learn the game, hopefully the better you become. And I think the same applies to what you are doing currently and what you were doing before. Does that make sense?
100%. And one of the things that I learned early on is I would listen intently to what coaches would tell me. And they would say, well, we don't have the money or support. And then I would say, well, why don't you? And they'd say, well, I heard this 100 times before I actually did anything about it. They would say we send letters out to the local businesses, or we call the local businesses, and we never hear back.
Mhm.
And then I would actually go in and visit, because part of our job in our business is to build these discount products. So we go into these businesses and they put discounts on our products. And I would ask the business owner, say, hey, did you ever get a phone call or a letter from this coach or this booster club?
Mhm.
And they'd say, yeah, I got that letter. And I was trying to understand what they were asking me for. And I realized the two sides don't speak the same language. And as I've matured as a business owner, and always understanding what it was to be a student athlete and even a coach for a short time, when I did some coaching, I understood, like, the business owner is just trying to run their business. They're happy to help, but you got to make it super easy to draw the line of how them writing a check or donating food is going to benefit their business. But on the flip side, the coach is so busy, um,
Mhm.
teaching, coaching, running their program. They don't have time to walk around and spend an hour with every business owner. So I said, you know what? I want to connect the two. And that's really, in essence, what we do. Is we take our knowledge of what's needed in high school sports, and we try to connect it to the business community, and find companies that want to invest in amateur sports, and um, we find a way for them to get a return on their investment too, because that's important. A lot of people will say to me, why doesn't this company just write a check? It's a write-off. It's still money coming out of their end line. So if they're writing a check, they could write a check to anyone. You have to give them a compelling reason to write a check to you and what's important to you. And so that's what we've tried to do, is we try to bridge the gap. Why should you provide a discount? Why should you write a check? Why should you donate? And then we find a reason why, we connect it, and we try to create these win-win relationships all over the state. And that's really it. It continues to grow. As I said, before we started the official meeting here, um, we're busier now with a lot of these initiatives. So I don't see us stopping anytime soon. The need is only going to get greater, in my opinion.
And it's especially too, and we're just about running out of time here. I want to get to the All-Star game quick, but you're right. As things evolve, as we've noticed with media, the paper is starting to kind of become a thing of the past, as social media and the phones and all of that start to really become a thing. How do you capitalize? If you don't evolve, you become a quote unquote, not calling anybody old, but you become a dinosaur, and you get
Yes.
stuck by the wayside, while the people who are changing, and I've kind of have been forced to do that because I hated change, but if you don't change, you're going to stay behind while everybody else gets forward. But again, I could talk about that forever. I want to get to the All-Star game quick before we end this interview, and I appreciate you coming
Sure.
on, James. Inaugural, as far as New York, Connecticut senior All-Star game. And for football, I mean, anytime you can play football more than, get that one extra game, whatever it is, especially for these seniors who, well, let's be honest, not all are going to play college football. Some are just good in high school, and are
Sure.
like, you know what? I just want to focus. I just want to go be a doctor. I want to go. I want to be an electrician. I want to be whatever. I don't want to play college football, but I will play in this game because it's the last time I'll wear the pads that I used to wear for my team and such. How did this happen?
Yeah. So the real simple part of the story is, in 2020, when NFP Sports took on the task of handling the marketing for the CHSCA, I asked a very simple question to Joe Canzanella. I said, when football comes back, are you open to having an all-star game for this, the seniors again? And he said, absolutely. There's no question. And the the real challenge was 2019 was the last game, and that was an intra-state game, Connecticut v. Connecticut. And it was we had this core group of coaches that were very committed to it.
Mhm.
And they were committed to it, but the rest of the state seemed to be a little disinterested. So when I sat down with them and brought Joe, and we had a meeting at Buffalo Wild Wings, and what the resounding consensus was, an interstate game. We want to play another state. That's compelling. We want to give that to our kids. And so we said, all right, let's figure out if Rhode Island still wants to play. And we reached out to them, and they took a vote. To their credit, they did give it a try, but they couldn't get consensus. So I reached out to my connections in New York, and we got to the executive director, Kevin Depard of the New York State High School Football Coach Association. They hadn't had a game since 2016. So I laid out my vision. I said, look, I used to sponsor the New York, New Jersey All-Star game at West Point. What are the chances of Connecticut coming up and playing New York and West Point? And he had, I could hear him kind of chuckling on the phone. He said, I don't know, but let me make a couple calls. He got back to me a couple of days later and he said, they're interested. And at that point, I spoke to Joe and Tom Dyer, and we went up to Albany and we met with them from right in the Coach Association offices in Albany. And that's kind of how we got there. And now we're having our press conference on the 26th at one of our first sponsors that we picked up, Buffalo Wild Wings. And we're going to announce the game. And what we know right now is the two sides are committed to a 2-game series at minimum. New York hosting the first year, Connecticut hosting the second. All of the football related details are going to be worked out by the football committee. But yeah, so we're not ready to talk about that, but we know the two teams are ready. The two sides are ready to put this game together.
That's awesome, James. And again, I'm sure I'll have you back on to talk about the nitty gritty, the good stuff as far as, players and
Sure,
football stuff. We'll get into that as it gets closer, because let's be honest, games start September 7th, maybe a couple days earlier for some teams. I know the NVL, our first broadcast will be September 7th. Don't know the game yet. Have to get that finalized. But, football is going to be here before we know it. It's going to be awesome. James, I really appreciate you coming on. This was awesome. And love to get you back on sometime in the near future.
You got it, Chris. I appreciate you having me.
Always. I'll wrap things up here in the CT Sports Talent Show. So until next time, stay safe. Where CT stands for Connecticut Talent, I'm going to find them all. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and be well.